I am Benjamin Carter. I'm 70 years old, and I just discovered my entire life was built on a lie. 5 minutes ago, I watched my daughter-in-law Megan heave a heavy suitcase into the lake and speed off. I just pulled it out. My heart stopped. Inside, I found my son Lucas's passport, his empty wallet, and two heavy landscaping rocks. I stared at the dark water, my mind connecting the dots. It wasn't a disappearance. It was murder. And she did it. Before I tell you what I did next and how much worse the truth actually became, let me know where you are watching this from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever been betrayed by someone you were supposed to trust. The Willows did a poor job of hiding a man my size. My knees ached from crouching, the damp evening air settling deep into my bones. I'm 70 and I'm too old for this kind of spying. I shouldn't have been there. I was just taking my evening walk, the same route I've taken every day for the 5 years since my wife Sarah passed. But the sound of a car struggling on the gravel service road pulled my attention. It was Megan, my daughter-in-law. Her expensive BMW was parked dangerously close to the water's edge at Willow Creek Lake. The trunk was open. She was wrestling with a large black hardshell suitcase. It was clearly heavy. She grunted, her designer tracksuit looking ridiculous for this kind of work. My first thought, the thought of an old engineer, was that her posture was all wrong. She was lifting with her back, not her legs. She was going to throw her back out. My second thought, what in God's name was she doing? This wasn't a county dump. This was the reservoir. Was she illegally dumping trash? It wouldn't surprise me. Megan lived a life of convenience, a life funded mostly by me and my son's bad investments. She was always trying to get rid of what she called old junk, which usually meant antiques Sarah and I had owned for 40 years. She looked around wildly, her eyes darting left and right, paranoid. She didn't see me hidden in the shadows of the trees. With a final desperate heave, she shoved the suitcase over the bank. It hit the water with a heavy, sickening thud. It was not a splash. It was a thud, like something dense and solid hitting the thick mud of the lakebed. She didn't wait to watch it sink. She slammed her trunk, jumped into the driver's seat, and peeled out tires, spitting gravel. The red glow of her taillights disappeared down the dark road, leaving only silence and the smell of wet dirt. I stood there for a full minute. My heart was hammering against my ribs. This was wrong. This wasn't her dumping old clothes. That sound. I didn't even think. I half slid, half ran down the muddy bank. The water was ice cold, a shock to my system. It soaked my jeans instantly, stealing my breath. "Damn it, Megan," I muttered, my voice shaking. The suitcase was only about 15 feet out, snagged on a submerged log just below the surface. It weighed a ton. I grabbed the handle and braced my feet in the sucking mud. I pulled, dragging it back to the shore. It felt like I was pulling a body. My mind recoiled from the thought. Don't be stupid, Ben. It's just trash. It's just her ridiculous, wasteful life. I got it onto the muddy grass. My hands were trembling, partly from the cold, partly from something else. Fear. The suitcase was a standard Samsonite. Black, scuffed. It had combination locks, but she hadn't bothered to lock them. She just snapped the latches shut. She had been in a hurry. I put my thumb on the latch. Click. I took a deep breath. Click. I lifted the lid. My heart stopped. Not slowed down. It stopped. At the top, tossed in, were Lucas's favorite hiking boots, the ones I bought him when we tried to reconnect last year in the Rockies. Underneath them, his leather wallet, his passport. And at the bottom, explaining the weight, were two heavy gray landscaping rocks, the exact kind that lined the walkway to their house, the kind I helped them install last summer. I stumbled back, falling hard onto the wet ground. The air left my lungs. The boots, the wallet, the passport, the rocks. This wasn't dumping trash. This wasn't hiding evidence of a theft. This was hiding evidence of a person. You don't throw away a man's passport unless he's never going to use it again. You don't weigh down his wallet with rocks unless you want it to sink. Oh my God, I whispered the words, trembling in the cold air. She killed him. That monster. She killed my son. I sat there soaking wet, shivering, staring at the open suitcase. My son was gone. My boy. The one I had poured everything into. The one I had paid off $50,000 in gambling debts for just 6 months ago. My mind, the engineer's mind, tried to take over. Call 911. Call the police. This is a crime scene. But another part of me, the father, screamed. She's still out there. She's driving away. I pulled out my phone. My fingers were stiff and numb. Who do I call the police? If I call them from here, she'll know. She'll run, she'll get a lawyer, she'll escape. Number 1. I needed to see her face. I needed to hear the lie she would tell. I closed the suitcase. I dragged it back into the thickest part of the willows, covered it with fallen branches, and wiped my muddy hands on my wet jeans. I was going to confront the devil herself. I gripped the steering wheel of my old pickup truck, the one Megan always said smelled like old tools and failure. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely keep the wheel straight. The wet denim of my jeans was ice cold against my skin, the lake water seeping into the cracked vinyl of the driver's seat. But I didn't feel the cold. I only felt the heat. A white-hot rage that started in my gut and spread through my whole body. I had to see her face. I had to hear the lie she would tell me. I fumbled for my phone on the passenger seat, my fingers stiff and clumsy. I hit the speed dial for Lucas. 1 ring, 2. Hey, this is Lucas. You know what to do. Leave a message. Voicemail. My thumb stiff with arthritis hit redial. I jammed the phone against my ear. Hey, this is Lucas. You know what to do. I threw the phone onto the floorboards. Damn it, Lucas, pick up, I whispered to the empty cab. But I knew he wouldn't. His wallet and passport were in a suitcase hidden in the mud and reeds back at the lake. A suitcase weighed down with rocks. My mind raced, trying to find any other explanation. Any answer that didn't end with my son at the bottom of that dark water. Maybe she was just dumping his old investing files. Maybe the passport was expired. But the rocks. The rocks kept coming back to me. Why would she weigh it down? My vision blurred, and it wasn't just the dark highway. The grief hit me in a wave, but it wasn't just for Lucas. It was for Sarah, my wife Sarah. She's been gone 5 years. Cancer. It was fast. One day we were planning a trip to see the Grand Canyon, the next I was picking out a casket. Sarah was always the buffer between me and Lucas. She understood him. I never did. Since she died, I tried. God knows I tried to connect with my son. But we are built from different materials. I'm a structural engineer. I spent 45 years building bridges, believing in load-bearing capacities, in logic, in things you can touch. I see the world as a set of problems that need stable, practical solutions. Lucas sees the world as a casino. He calls himself an investor. Always chasing the next big thing. Cryptocurrency, high-risk stocks, the surefire bet. He lives on luck. I live on physics. And his luck always ran out. Just 6 months ago. 6. I got a call at 2 in the morning. It was Lucas. He was terrified. He owed $50,000 to some very bad people. A gambling debt. $50,000. I spent my entire life saving, building the nest egg Sarah and I were supposed to live on. And I signed it away in one afternoon, wiring my savings to a faceless account to stop some thug from breaking my son's legs. I drove to their house, that massive, gaudy 5-bedroom monstrosity in the suburbs that I had co-signed the loan for. I told him it was the last time. And Megan, my daughter-in-law, she stood there, arms crossed, watching me lecture him. She didn't even say thank you. She just looked at me with that cold, assessing stare she always has. She despises me. I know she does. She thinks I'm an old country timer, a relic. She hates this truck. She hates my old house. That was the real fight between us. She wanted me to sell the house, the one Sarah and I bought in 1978, the one we raised our children in, the one my wife died in. She wanted me to sell that sacred place cash out and move into the tiny guest room above their 3-car garage. It just makes financial sense, Ben, she'd said last month in that chirpy, soulless voice of hers. We could manage your assets better. We could all be one happy family. I refused. I told her I would die in that house. I'll never forget the look in her eyes. It wasn't disappointment. It was calculation. As if she was trying to figure out exactly how long that might take. And now this. The suitcase. The passport. The rocks. I turned onto their street. The cul-de-sac was dark, their house lit up like a beacon at the very end. She was home. Of course she was. She was probably making a cocktail, feeling relieved. My heart was a cold stone in my chest. What was I walking into if she was capable of that? What would she do to me? The man who just saw her commit an unspeakable act. The man who, if he'd just sold his house, would have given her millions. When I get to that door, what is she going to say? Does she know I saw her? Does she have a gun? I parked the truck 2 blocks away in the shadows and started to walk. Every step felt heavy. I wasn't just walking toward her house. I was walking toward the end of my life as I knew it. I still had the emergency key to their house. The brass key felt cold and sharp against my palm as I stood on their perfectly manicured walkway. Sarah, my late wife, had insisted we give them a key just in case of emergency. I guess this qualified. I didn't knock. I shoved the key into the lock, twisted it hard, and pushed the heavy oak door open. The house was silent, except for the bright, cheerful sound of a game show blaring from the living room. I followed the sound, my muddy boots squelching on their pristine white marble foyer. I was tracking lake water and dirt into her perfect house, and for the first time in my life, I didn't care. I found her. Megan. She was lounging on a giant white sectional sofa, her feet tucked under her, scrolling through her phone with one hand and holding a glass of white wine in the other. She looked up as my shadow fell across the room, her face twisting in annoyance. Ben, what on earth? You nearly gave me a heart attack. I thought you… Where is he? My voice didn't sound like my own. It was low, gravelly. The voice of a man who had just dragged a 70-pound suitcase out of a lake. She sat up, placing her wine glass on the coaster. Where is who, Ben? You're tracking mud all over the carpet. Are you okay? Lucas? I took a step closer, leaving another wet footprint. Where is Lucas? I called him. It went straight to voicemail. And I just saw you, Megan. I saw you at the lake. What did you throw in the water? The color drained from her face. I saw it. For 1 second, her eyes were wide with pure, cold panic. She knew she'd been caught. And then just as quickly, the mask went up. Her face crumpled. Her perfectly shaped lips quivered. She put her hand to her mouth, and her shoulders began to shake. It was a performance. But it was a damn good one. Oh God, Ben, she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. You saw me. I didn't know what to do. I was so scared. I didn't move. I am an engineer. I wait for the data. What did you do, Megan? We had a fight. She wailed, the tears now flowing freely. A terrible, terrible fight. I kept my voice hard like stone. About what? Money, she yelled, looking up at me, her face a perfect mask of tragedy. What else is it ever about, Ben? Money. He lost again. Another one of his surefire investments. He told me he'd lost everything. He said he needed space. He said he was going away for a few weeks, maybe longer. He turned his phone off, Ben. He just left. She was good. She wove in the truth, the money, the fights to make the lie sound solid. But my mind flashed back to the passport, the wallet, the rocks. A man who needs space doesn't leave his passport behind. I had to test her. I had to see how deep the lie went. I softened my voice, shifting my own role from accuser to concerned father-in-law. Okay, honey, calm down. I walked a step closer, pretending to be on her side. He just left. He packed a bag. She nodded quickly, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. Yes, he was so angry. He just started throwing things into a bag. I set the trap. My voice was gentle. Which one? Which suitcase did he take? She looked confused by the question, as if she was quickly running calculations in her head. Which one? His usual one. She hesitated. The blue navy one. The carry-on he always takes on business trips. He packed it this morning and just stormed out. I froze. The entire world narrowed down to those two words. Blue navy. The suitcase I pulled from the lake was black. A large hardshell Samsonite. Not a carry-on. She lied. She wasn't just hiding something. She had invented a completely different story. My first theory that she had killed him was suddenly shaky. Why lie about the suitcase? If she'd killed him and dumped his things, she would have described the real suitcase. She wouldn't have invented a fake one. My mind was spinning. What was happening? This wasn't a simple lie. This was a complex one. I forced myself to play along. I had to get out of there. I now possessed a piece of information that she didn't know I had. I put my hand on her shoulder. She flinched, but I faked the gesture of comfort. Okay, Megan. Okay. That sounds like Lucas. He always runs when things get tough. She looked up, her eyes wide with what looked like relief. You believe me, you're not mad. He needs time to cool off, I said, ignoring her question. I'm sure he'll call in a few days, probably when he needs more money. I let that last part hang in the air, a small barb of truth. I should go. I'm sorry I burst in like this. I was just a worried old man. No, Ben, thank you for coming, she said, walking me to the door. Suddenly the perfect, caring daughter-in-law again, relieved that the old fool had bought her story. We'll get through this. I walked out into the cool night air. I got back in my truck and sat in the darkness, the smell of lake water and mud filling the cab. My mind was clear. She lied about the suitcase. She lied about the color. She lied about the size. If Lucas had left, why did she throw that other suitcase in the lake? And if he didn't leave, why was she lying about him leaving? Why did she lie about that specific detail? I walked back to my truck, the mud from the lake drying and stiffening on my pants. I didn't look back at the house. I got in the cab of the old pickup, smelling of lake water and my own fear. I didn't start the engine right away. I just sat there in the darkness, 2 blocks down from their perfect house on their perfect street. Blue navy. She said it was a blue navy carry-on. The suitcase hidden under a tarp in the back of my truck, the one I had just dragged from the lake, was a 30-inch hardshell Samsonite, and it was black. She lied. My heart wasn't racing anymore. It settled into a low, heavy thud. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a slip of the tongue in a moment of panic. You don't misremember the color and size of the suitcase your husband packed when he stormed out just that morning. You don't mistake a small blue bag for a large black one. It was a deliberate, calculated lie. I started the engine. My hands were steady on the wheel now. The shock was gone. The grief was gone. All that was left was the cold, hard logic of an engineer. When a structure is compromised, you don't grieve. You find the flaw. And Megan's story was full of flaws. I drove home back to the small brick house Sarah and I bought in 1978. My sanctuary. The entire drive I analyzed the data. Flaw number 1. The suitcase color. she lied. Flaw number 2, the contents. If Lucas was running away, why throw his passport in the lake? He loved talking about escaping to Costa Rica or Switzerland. He couldn't get past the airport parking lot without that passport. Flaw number 3, the wallet. It was empty. No driver's license, no credit cards. Who storms out of their life with no money and no ID? Flaw number 4, Megan herself. My mind went back 6 months. I was sitting at that same kitchen table where she had just performed her breakdown for me. I had just signed the check. $50,000. It was almost everything I had left from my retirement savings. This is the last time, Lucas, I had said, my voice shaking with shame for him. You are breaking your mother's memory. Lucas, my son, just stared at the table, unable to look me in the eye. But Megan had watched that check pass from my hand to his with cold, assessing eyes. She hadn't said a word. She didn't thank me. She didn't look grateful. She looked disappointed. Later that night, when they thought I was asleep in the guest room, I heard her whispering to him. Her voice was sharp, like broken glass. 50. That's all you got out of him. He's sitting on that house, Lucas. It's worth millions. Why didn't you just ask for the full 70? He would have paid it. He's a sentimental old fool. She wasn't a grieving wife. She was an opportunist. She was a predator who saw me, her father-in-law, as a resource she hadn't fully tapped. I pulled into my garage and hit the button. The door rumbled shut, sealing me inside with my tools, my blueprints, and the truth. The black suitcase was sitting on my workbench where I'd left it. I had hosed off the worst of the mud. It looked sinister under the single fluorescent bulb. Her story didn't add up. It was sloppy. Too sloppy. If Lucas just left, why throw any suitcase in the lake? If she had killed him? Why lie about the type of suitcase? Why invent a blue one when the real black one was right there? It felt like a deliberate misdirection. It felt like she wanted me to be confused. I stared at the suitcase. It was sitting there, mocking me. The lie wasn't just sloppy. It was wrong. A horrible thought crept into my mind. What if I missed something? I looked at the suitcase again. I had pulled it out of the water. I had opened it. I had seen the boots, the empty wallet, the passport, the landscaping rocks. I was so focused on the implication of those items that I hadn't looked closer. I'm 70 years old. My eyes aren't what they used to be, but my mind is sharp. My mind builds bridges that are still standing after 50 years. I find flaws in structures, and I had missed a flaw. I walked over to the workbench and put on my heavy-duty reading glasses. I wasn't just looking at the contents anymore. I was going to examine them. I picked up the muddy passport. I flipped through the pages. What did I miss? I picked up the empty leather wallet. I ran my fingers along the seams. I checked the boots. I must have missed something. I needed to check that suitcase again, not as a grieving father, but as an engineer analyzing a catastrophic failure. I needed to know why she lied about the color. I couldn't sleep. The lie just sat in my stomach like bad food. Blue navy. Blue navy. Why lie about that? I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the old house creak. The clock on the nightstand clicked over. 3:58 a.m. 3:59. At 4 a.m. on the dot, I was out of bed. My joints popped in protest. I didn't turn on the lights. I pulled on the same muddy jeans from the night before. They were still damp and cold on the floor. I grabbed my heavy work boots. This felt insane. A 70-year-old man, a grandfather, sneaking out of his own house in the dead of night. I felt like a thief. I felt like a fool. But I'm an engineer. I've spent my entire life looking at structures, finding the weak points. Megan's story was a badly designed bridge, and I had just found the hairline fracture. The lie about the suitcase. Now I had to go back and apply pressure to that fracture. I had to see what else I missed. I needed data. I needed the truth. The drive back to the lake was different. The first time I was panicked, grieving. Now I was focused. The roads were empty. The town was asleep. The darkness felt like a shield. I parked the truck in the same spot 2 blocks away, but this time I grabbed a heavy-duty flashlight from my toolbox. I walked back to the service road. It was pitch black. The only sound was the crunch of my boots on the gravel and the distant hum of the highway. My breath plumed in the cold air. I found the spot. The willows were thick. I pushed my way through, my heart starting to pound again. What if she came back? What if she realized she'd been seen and came back to move it? But no, there it was. I shined the flashlight on the bush where I'd hidden it. The black hardshell suitcase was still there, covered in the branches I'd thrown over it. It was streaked with mud and wet leaves. I grabbed the handle. It was just as heavy as I remembered. I had to drag it, my boots slipping in the mud, my lower back screaming in protest. I'm not a young man. This was hard work. I grunted, pulling it inch by inch up the embankment. I wasn't just pulling a suitcase. I was pulling a secret. This was crazy. I should be calling the police. What was I doing, tampering with potential evidence, but evidence of what? If I called them now, they would ask Megan, and she would tell them the Blue Navy story. She would cry, she would play the victim, and they would look at me, the sentimental old fool who was muddy and confused at 4 a.m, and they would believe her. Number 1. I couldn't let that happen. This was my son, my family, my problem to solve. I got the suitcase to the top of the embankment and hauled it over to the truck. It took me 3 tries to lift it into the bed. My shoulder twinged. I was breathing hard, leaning against the tailgate. I looked around. No cars, no lights, just me and this terrible heavy box. I drove home, slowly. My eyes were glued to the rearview mirror. Every headlight behind me made my stomach clench. Was that her? Was that the police? Was I being followed? By the time I reached my street, my shirt was soaked with sweat despite the cold. I pulled into my driveway and hit the garage door opener. The old door rumbled open. I drove inside onto the clean concrete floor that I had poured myself 30 years ago. I hit the button again. The door came down, sealing me inside. Silence. I sat in the truck for a moment, the engine ticking as it cooled. I was safe. This was my space, my garage, my tools, my rules. I got out and locked the door that led into the house. I locked the side door. I was alone. I lowered the tailgate and slid the suitcase onto my workbench. It sat there under the bright fluorescent lights, looking obscene. It was a piece of the chaos from their world now sitting in the middle of my orderly one. I looked at it. I wasn't grieving anymore. I wasn't panicked. I was an engineer. And this was a structural problem. I had missed something the first time because I was emotional. I was looking at the implication of the items, not the items themselves. I was looking at the passport and thinking, he's dead. This time I was going to be different. I was going to be methodical. I was going to analyze every piece of data. This time, I was going to check every millimeter. I put on my heavy-duty reading glasses and snapped on a pair of nitrile gloves. This was no longer just my son's luggage. This was evidence. Under the harsh fluorescent lights of my garage, I opened the suitcase again. The smell of lake water and mud was strong. I carefully removed the items one by one, laying them out on a clean plastic tarp I'd spread on the workbench. The 2 landscaping rocks, heavy gray jagged, identical to the ones in Megan's garden. They were the ballast, designed to sink the case. The hiking boots, his favorites, still damp. A pair of jeans, a crumpled t-shirt. His dop kit, toothbrush razor. The mundane details of a life, and then the core items, the wallet, the passport. I examined the passport first. It was his, Lucas Carter. The photo was him smiling that easy smile he always had, the one that got him out of trouble, the one that always made me give in. It was valid. It wasn't expired. Absolutely no one throws away a valid passport if they are running away. I picked up the wallet, a worn leather bifold. I opened it. Empty. No cash. No credit cards. No driver's license. She had wiped it clean. Why, if you're staging a murder, why take the driver's license but leave the passport? It felt inconsistent. I ran my fingers along the seams of the wallet, checking for hidden pockets. Nothing. I turned my attention back to the suitcase itself. It was empty now, just a large black shell, the silk lining stained with mud and water. I ran my hands along the inside, feeling every inch of the fabric. I pressed down. I felt the rigid frame underneath, and then I felt it. Under the lining at the very bottom, there was a small square lump that shouldn't have been there. It wasn't part of the suitcase frame. It was something under the lining. My heart started that low, heavy thud again. I went to my pegboard and grabbed my utility knife. With a steady hand, the hand of a man who has cut precise lines for 50 years, I sliced the silk lining. I cut a careful square around the lump. I peeled the wet fabric back. It wasn't much. It was a single piece of paper folded into a tiny, tight square shoved deep into the insulation of the suitcase. It was damp, but the ink was still legible. My hands shook as I unfolded it. It was a parking ticket. A receipt from the long-term parking garage at O'Hare International Airport. My eyes scanned the details. Entry date yesterday. 10:32 a.m. Garage C. This made no sense. My mind was racing, the pieces clicking into place like tumblers in a lock. Megan's story. Lucas left this morning with a blue carry-on. That was a lie. My first theory, Megan killed him and dumped his belongings. But if she killed him, why was there a parking ticket from yesterday? Did she kill him at the airport? No. That was too public. Too risky. My second theory, Lucas killed himself, and Megan found his things and dumped them. But that didn't fit either. Why would he drive to the airport, pull a ticket, and then kill himself? And why would Megan lie about the blue suitcase, the ticket? The ticket was the key. He entered the parking garage yesterday at 10:32 a.m. He parked his car. He took his suitcase, the black one. And then what? He met someone. He met Megan, and what about the empty wallet and missing driver's license? The car. The car had to still be there. If Lucas drove to the airport and parked his car and this suitcase ended up in the lake, then the car was still at O'Hare. A new wave of cold, different from the lake water, washed over me. This was worse than I thought. This wasn't a simple, panicked crime of passion. This was planned. The lie about the blue suitcase, the empty wallet, the passport, the rocks. It was all noise, it was all misdirection. Megan wanted me to think one of two things: that he ran away or that he was dead. But this ticket, this suggested a third option I couldn't yet see. I looked at the clock on the garage wall. 4:52 a.m. I ripped off the gloves. I grabbed my keys. I didn't bother to change out of my muddy jeans. I was going to O'Hare. It was a 3-hour drive. I didn't care. That parking ticket was a breadcrumb, and I was going to follow it all the way to the truth. Why would a man's parking ticket be at the bottom of a suitcase that was thrown in a lake I didn't bother changing? The mud on my jeans was dry and stiff, cracking as I climbed back into the driver's seat of the pickup. The sun was just beginning to stain the eastern sky a pale, sickly gray. It was 5 in the morning. I hadn't slept. I didn't feel tired. I just felt cold. I backed out of the garage and pointed the truck toward the highway. 3 hours. 3 hours to O'Hare. The highway was dark, mostly just long-haul truckers, at this hour, their headlights glaring in my rearview mirror. I kept the truck at a steady 70 miles per hour. My mind wasn't on the road. It was on Lucas. He always had those big dreams. He was obsessed with Switzerland. He had a picture of the Matterhorn taped to his computer monitor. "One day, Dad," he'd say, "I'm going to be sitting in a chalet looking at that mountain trading stocks from my laptop. No more 9 to 5. He wasn't lazy. He was just undisciplined. He wanted the reward without the structural work. He wanted the bridge without the blueprints. My wife, Sarah. God rest her soul, she always understood him better than I did. She was the one who balanced me out. I remember one night years ago, Lucas came home from college excited about some new online venture. I tore it apart. I showed him the flaws in the business model, the lack of capital, the unrealistic projections. I was just being an engineer. I was showing him the weak points. He deflated. He just slunk off to his room. Later that night, Sarah came to me in the den. She stood in the doorway, her arms crossed. "You're too hard on him, Ben," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I'm just trying to teach him to be realistic, Sarah. The world doesn't run on dreams." "No," she said, walking over to me. "But it doesn't run without them either. He's not an engineer, Ben. He's not you. And if you keep trying to make him you, you're going to break something. You're going to push him away." I gripped the steering wheel, the memory as fresh as if it happened yesterday. Maybe she was right, I whispered to the empty cab. Maybe I did break him. My mind flashed to 6 months ago. The last time I saw him clearly. He was sitting at his kitchen table, head in his hands, after I'd agreed to pay the $50,000. "I'm sorry, Dad," he'd mumbled. "I thought it was a sure thing. I can fix it." "You can't fix it, Lucas," I had yelled. I was so angry. Not just about the money, but about the stupidity of it, the waste. "This is the last time. Do you hear me, the last time?" He looked up at me. His eyes weren't just ashamed. They were desperate, cornered, like a fox with its leg in a trap. What if that was the moment? What if that was the push that sent him over the edge? What if I drove all the way to O'Hare just to find out my son was dead and that I was the one who pushed him? The thought was a physical pain worse than the cold from the lake. I pressed the accelerator. The old truck's engine whined in protest. I had to know. The sun was fully up when I saw the signs for O'Hare International, the sheer scale of the place. Jets roared overhead one after another, taking people to their destinations, taking them to Switzerland, to Costa Rica. I followed the signs for long-term parking. The ticket in my pocket, the damp, folded square that felt like a death warrant, said Garage C. I pulled up to the gate. I took a ticket from the automated machine. The barrier arm lifted. I drove into the concrete maze. It was vast. Floor after floor of cars, thousands of them, all covered in a thin layer of dust. Each one a story. Each one a person who had left expecting to come back. Garage C. I found the section. I drove slowly down the first aisle, then the second. My eyes scanned the license plates, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I was looking for his black BMW, the one I had co-signed for. The one Megan hated because she wanted a newer model. This was it. I was here. The answer was somewhere in this concrete tomb. Is the car here? And dear God, if it is, what am I going to find inside? I saw it on the third aisle, tucked between a dusty minivan and a red sports car. A black BMW 5 Series. His car. The license plate matched the one I had memorized from the loan documents. My breath caught in my chest. He was here. He had been here. I parked my truck 10 spaces away and just sat there staring at it. The dust on its windshield was undisturbed. It had been sitting here since yesterday morning, just as the ticket implied. My legs felt like lead as I got out of the truck. Every step was heavy. I was walking toward an answer, and I was terrified of what I would find. I fumbled in my pocket for my keychain. It holds all my keys, my house key, my garage key, and a spare key to that BMW. I have it because I co-signed the loan. Lucas was always forgetting his keys, locking himself out. Sarah used to laugh about it. I just found it irresponsible. Now that irresponsibility was the only thing that would let me in. I reached the car. I looked through the tinted window. I couldn't see much, just the dark outline of the empty seats. My hand was shaking. I put the key in the lock. It clicked, a sound that seemed deafeningly loud in the concrete silence of the garage. I pulled the handle. The door swung open with a soft whoosh. The smell hit me first. Stale air. The faint, sickly, sweet scent of an old air freshener and something else. The smell of old fast food. My eyes scanned the interior. The driver's seat was pushed back. An empty coffee cup sat in the center console. Everything looked normal. Messy, but normal. My son's car. I leaned in, my heart pounding, looking for, I don't know what. A sign. A stain. Anything. And then I saw it. On the passenger seat, almost hidden in the shadow, was a pharmacy bottle, an amber-colored prescription bottle. I reached in. My fingers closed around the plastic. I brought it out into the dim light. The label was in his name. Lucas Carter. The prescription was for a powerful sleeping aid. I knew it. He'd had trouble sleeping for years. I shook the bottle. Empty. Not one pill. Not even the cotton. My blood ran cold. No, I whispered. No, Lucas. My eyes darted back to the seat. Under where the bottle had been, there was a piece of paper. A single sheet torn from a legal pad, folded in half. I picked it up. My fingers were so numb I could barely grasp it. I unfolded the paper. The handwriting was his. Messy, rushed, barely legible. But it was his. It wasn't long. Just 4 words. I can't do it anymore. And then underneath, one last line added as an afterthought. I'm sorry, Dad. I collapsed against the side of the car. My legs gave out. The note fluttered from my hand to the concrete floor. I understood. I finally understood. He drove here intending to fly away, to escape, to go to Switzerland or Costa Rica or one of his other fantasies. He pulled the ticket. He parked the car. And then he just couldn't. My words from 6 months ago echoed in my head. This is the last time, Lucas. The last time, his desperate, cornered eyes. I did this. I was the one. I, his father, had been the one to push him over the edge. I was the one who broke him, just like Sarah said I would. Oh God, Sarah! I choked out, covering my face with my hands. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, son. I was a bad father. A critical, unyielding, demanding old man. And my son was dead because of it. I stayed there, leaning against the car, for how long I don't know. The grief was a physical weight pressing me down into the concrete. But then through the fog of pain, a new thought emerged. A cold, sharp thought that cut right through the sorrow. Megan. I had just seen her. She was fine. She was drinking wine. She was watching television. And she had lied. If Lucas drove here and killed himself, if he was so distraught that he took his own life, why did Megan tell me he just packed a blue carry-on and stormed out? Why would she lie about that? Why would she act so calm, so casual, if she knew her husband was in this much pain? My mind raced. She said she'd found the suitcase and the note, She'd said she was hiding it for the insurance, but that was after I confronted her. Her first story was a lie. I picked up the note. "I'm sorry, Dad." Not "I'm sorry, Megan." Not "I'm sorry, Mom and Dad." He wrote it to me. If Lucas did this, and Megan found him, or found the note, why is she lying to me? Why is she throwing a different suitcase, his suitcase, into the lake? Why is she trying to create a different story? If my son is dead, why is his wife lying about how he disappeared? I dialed her number. She picked up on the second ring, her voice sickeningly cheerful. "Ben, is everything okay? Did you forget something?" I couldn't breathe. I tried to speak, but the grief and the rage were choking me. "Megan." I finally managed my voice a dry rasp. "Ben, you sound awful. What's wrong? Is it Lucas? Did he call you?" "I found it, Megan." The line went silent. Just the faint hiss of an open connection. "Found. Found what, Ben? I don't—" "The car?" I said, my voice breaking. "I'm at O'Hare. I found his car." I heard her sharp intake of breath. "And I found the note, Megan. I found the bottle." I waited. I heard a sound, a muffled thump, like she had dropped the phone or stumbled. Then her voice high-pitched, frantic. "What? No? What note? What are you talking about? I don't know anything, I swear." It was the same fake panic as last night. "Stop it!" I yelled, slamming my fist against the dashboard. "Just stop lying. I know he's gone, Megan. I know he killed himself. I saw the note. I saw the empty pills. He's gone." The silence on the other end was different this time. It wasn't confusion. It was calculation. Then came the wail. It was a terrible theatrical sound, a performance of grief so loud it distorted the phone's speaker. "Oh my God, no, no, he didn't. Ben, I didn't know what to do." This was it. The second lie. The real story. "What are you hiding?" I demanded. "I didn't know where the car was. I swear," she sobbed. "I didn't, but—" "Okay, yes, I lied. I lied last night." "Why, Megan?" "Why lie about the blue suitcase?" "Because I panicked." She screamed. "Okay, I panicked. I found the suitcase, the black one, in the garage. He left it there with the note on top. The note, Ben. The one you found." I stayed quiet. I let her talk. I let her dig the hole deeper. "I saw the note," she rushed on. "I saw the pills were gone. I knew what he'd done. And I broke Ben. I didn't know what to do. So you threw his things in the lake?" I asked, my voice cold. "Yes. No, I mean, yes, I just thought, oh God, Ben, we're drowning in debt. You know that. You paid the $50,000, but that was just the start. There's more, so much more. And I thought about the insurance. There it was. The truth, or at least a truth." "The life insurance," she sobbed. "It's $5 million, Ben. But it has a clause. It won't pay out for suicide in the first 2 years. We've only had the policy for 18 months. If the police found that note, if they ruled it a suicide, we'd get nothing. We'd lose the house. We'd lose everything." I closed my eyes. It was monstrous. It was ghoulish. It was her. "So you faked a disappearance," I whispered, the pieces falling into place. "I was just trying to buy us time," she cried. "I was just trying to make it look like he'd disappeared, like he'd run off, so that after a few months we could claim the insurance. I was trying to protect our future. Ben, I was doing it for us." I sat there in the driver's seat of my son's car in the concrete tomb where he died, listening to his wife explain how she had desecrated his memory for money. "The suitcase," I said, "the one I saw you throw, the black one. Yes, I just grabbed his things he'd left behind. I put rocks in it. I threw it in the lake. I was going to call the police in a few days and pretend to be a worried wife. I lied about the blue one because you scared me. I just said the first thing that came to my mind. It all made a terrible, awful kind of sense. It was ruthless. It was cold. It was calculating. It was exactly who Megan was. The woman who saw my $50,000 bailout as a down payment. I finally understood. My son was dead, driven to it by debt and despair, and his wife was just a vulture picking over the bones trying to profit from the tragedy. I took a deep, shuddering breath. Megan, I said, my voice heavy, you have made a terrible, terrible mess. But I understand. The money, I understand. You do. Her voice was suddenly full of relief. Oh, Ben, thank you. I knew you would. We can fix this right. We can. I have to go, Megan, I said. I'm still at the airport. I have to call the police. I'll tell them I found the car. I won't mention the note. We'll stick to your story. That he's just missing. Thank you, Ben, thank you. You're a good man. You're saving us. I hung up the phone. I sat in the silence. My hand was steady now. The grief was gone, replaced by something cold and hard. She was lying. She was still lying. Her new story, the insurance story, it was just as flawed as the first one. Because if she found the suitcase and the note in the garage, and she threw the suitcase in the lake, why was the note here in the car at the airport? And if she was trying to fake a disappearance, why would she throw away his passport? That's the one thing you need to disappear. She wanted me to believe he killed himself, but she also wanted me to believe he just ran away. She was playing both sides. The story still didn't fit. The structure was still wrong. And if both of her stories were lies, then what was the truth? I let out a long, shaky breath, the phone still pressed to my ear. Thank you, Ben. She was sobbing on the other end. You're saving us. You're a good man. I said the words, but they felt like ash in my mouth. Okay, Megan. Okay. You did what you thought you had to do. I get it. I'll call the police. I'll just tell them I found the car. I won't mention the note. We'll solve this together. I hung up the phone. I sat in the dark, stale air of my son's car. The silence of the parking garage was absolute. I did not believe a single word she just said. My mind, the engineer's mind, was working now. The grief was a heavy weight, but my brain was moving, analyzing, processing the data. She was a pathological liar. She had told me two completely different stories in less than 12 hours, and both of them were structurally unsound. Both of them were full of holes. I am a man who builds bridges. I design structures to withstand floods, earthquakes, and the weight of 1,000 cars. I know when a load-bearing wall is compromised. I know when the math is wrong. And Megan's math was all wrong. Let's analyze story number 1. He packed a blue carry-on and stormed out. A lie. The suitcase in the lake was black and large. Why lie about that? And why would she dump a different suitcase full of his personal effects if he just ran away? It made no sense. Now story number 2. He killed himself. I found the note and the suitcase in the garage. I panicked and threw the suitcase in the lake to fake a disappearance for the $5 million insurance policy. This one was better. It was smarter. It appealed to her greed. It explained her panic. It explained why she was lying to me, but it was still wrong. The structure of that lie was also collapsing. Flaw number 1, the biggest one. The suicide note. She said she found the note at home in the garage on top of the black suitcase, but I was holding it. I was sitting in his car at O'Hare Airport, and the note was here. It was on the passenger seat. She had no idea where the car was. She was lying. Flaw number 2. The passport. I looked at the passport I'd taken from the suitcase now sitting on my dashboard. In what universe do you fake a disappearance by throwing away the one item that proves a person can disappear? If you want the police to believe your husband fled the country, you hide the passport. You make it look like he took it. You don't throw it in a lake with rocks. She might as well have sent up a flare that said, "I am lying." She was cold. She was greedy. But she wasn't stupid. So why was she telling such a stupid lie? I leaned my head back against the seat, the smell of old coffee and stale air filling my lungs. I was missing something. I was looking at the details, but I was missing the design. What if the lies weren't mistakes? What if the confusion was the point? She was throwing out two different contradictory narratives. One for me, he ran away. One for the police if they found the note, he killed himself. She was creating chaos. She was muddying the water just like she'd muddied that suitcase. And why would you do that? You do that when the truth is a third option. An option so terrible that running away and suicide are the better alternatives. My son was dead. I felt it in my bones. He was dead. And his wife wasn't just covering it up for insurance. She was staging it. She was creating a narrative. This was not a panicked reaction. This was a plan. I was in over my head. I was a 70-year-old engineer, not a detective. I was dealing with a cold, calculating woman who was clearly smarter than I had given her credit for. And I was alone. I couldn't call the police. Not yet. Megan had already poisoned that well. She would cry, she would perform, she would tell them the insurance story. And I was the one who had tampered with the evidence. I was the one with the muddy suitcase in the back of my truck. They would look at me, the grieving, confused old man, and they would believe her. I needed an ally. I needed someone who would believe me, someone who was not part of this. My heart sank. There was only one person. I pulled out my phone. I scrolled past Lucas, past Megan, past my hardware store contacts, until I found the name. Lila. My daughter. I hadn't spoken to Lila in 2 months. Not really. I'd missed her son's birthday last week. I always focused on Lucas. Lucas was the project that always needed fixing. He was the unstable bridge that took all my attention. Lila. She was the stable one. The nurse. The one with the good husband and the 2 great kids. The one who never asked for anything. And because she never asked, I never gave. I never gave her my time. I felt a wave of deep, profound shame. I was a bad father to Lucas, and I was an absent father to Lila. But now I had no one else. I had to make the call. I had to swallow my pride and admit that I was lost, that I was scared, and that I needed my daughter. My thumb hovered over her name. Lila. It was just 4 letters, but it felt like the heaviest object in the car. Calling her for help felt like a final admission of failure. I had failed Lucas by being too hard, and I had failed Lila by not being present at all. Lucas was the problem I was always trying to solve. The unstable variable, the squeaky wheel. He got all my energy, all my worry, all my money. Lila, she was the constant. She was the bridge I built that stood perfectly on its own. She became a great nurse. She married a good, stable man. She had 2 kids I barely knew because I was always busy putting out whatever fire Lucas had started. And because she was stable, because she never asked for anything, I ignored her. I just let her be. The shame of it burned in my throat. I pressed the call button. It rang twice. Her voice was exactly as I remembered. Clear, professional, and distant. Dad. There was no warmth. Just surprise. I hadn't called her on a weekday morning in maybe ever. Lila, honey, it's me. My voice cracked. I, a 70-year-old engineer, felt like a small, lost child. I know I haven't been. I know I haven't been the best father to you. I've always been so focused on Lucas. I heard her sigh on the other end. It wasn't an angry sigh. It was a tired sigh. The sigh of someone who has heard this 1,000 times. I know, Dad. Her voice was flat. What's he done now? How much money do you need to send him? The words hit me harder than any physical blow. That's all I was to her. The family ATM. The Bank of Ben servicing the bad loan that was her brother. No. I choked out the word, thick with pain. No, honey. It's not money. Not this time. This time. It's worse. It's so much worse. Worse than 50,000 in gambling debts. What did he do, Dad? Kill someone. I flinched at the casual, bitter way she said it. Lila, I think he's the one who's dead. Silence. Complete total silence on the other end of the line. I could hear the faint sound of a hospital PA system in the background. She was at work. Dad, she said finally, her voice low and sharp. What are you talking about? Where are you? And it all came out. In a torrent. Like a dam breaking. I told her everything. I told her about walking by the lake. I told her about Megan and the heavy black suitcase. I told her about the contents, the passport, the empty wallet, the rocks. Wait. She interrupted, her voice all business. You found a suitcase in the lake. Did you call the police? No, let me finish, I pleaded. I went to her. I confronted her, and she lied to me, Lila. She told me he packed a blue carry-on and stormed out. It was a lie. A stupid, obvious lie. So you called the police then? No, I found something in the suitcase. A parking ticket. For O'Hare. From yesterday. I heard her sharp intake of breath. She was following. She was seeing the structure. I'm at O'Hare right now, honey. I'm in his car. I found it in Garage C. And, is he? He's not here, I said. But, I found a note. A suicide note. It just said, I can't do it anymore. I'm sorry, Dad. And an empty bottle of his sleeping pills. This time the silence was longer. I heard her walking, the sound of a door closing. She was in a private room. Oh, Dad, she whispered. Oh, God. Lucas. But that's not all, I said, my voice rising. I called her again. I told her what I found. And she changed her story. She said she knew he killed himself. She said she found the note at the house with the suitcase, and she threw the suitcase in the lake to hide the suicide, to fake a disappearance, so she could get his $5 million life insurance policy. $5 million, Lila whispered. But she's lying. I practically shouted, hitting the steering wheel. She's still lying, Lila. The note wasn't at the house. The note was here in the car, and the passport. Why would she throw the passport in the lake if she wanted to fake a disappearance? None of it makes sense, not story 1, not story 2, they're both full of holes. I was out of breath. I had laid all the data on the table. I waited. I heard her breathing slow and steady. She wasn't grieving. She was thinking. She was the nurse in the emergency room assessing the trauma. Dad, she said, and her voice was no longer distant. It was cold. It was focused. You're right. None of that makes sense. She's playing you. She's creating chaos. What do I do, Lila? I'm alone in this. No, you're not, she said. I'm booking a flight. I can be at O'Hare by 3 this afternoon. Do not leave that car. Do not call Megan back. Do not call the police. You tampered with the scene at the lake and you're in his car. Right now, you're the most suspicious person in this whole mess. You need a witness, Dad. And you need someone who isn't 70 years old and in shock. I'm coming. She hung up. I lowered the phone. I looked at the suicide note. I looked at the empty bottle. I had an ally. For the first time in 5 years, I wasn't alone. And she was right. I was a witness, but I looked like a suspect. She was coming. Now. What was our plan? I waited in the arrivals terminal at O'Hare, feeling out of place. I was a muddy 70-year-old engineer, in a place full of travelers and happy reunions. I felt like a ghost. I had moved my truck to the hourly parking, and I had the suicide note and the empty pill bottle in my coat pocket. The black suitcase was still in the back of my truck, covered by the tarp. At 3:15, I saw her. Lila. She was walking fast, a small rolling bag in one hand, her nurse's scrubs still on under a light jacket. She hadn't even gone home to change. She saw me, and her face was a mask of professional concern. She didn't run to me. She didn't cry. She just walked straight up to me, her steps full of purpose. "Dad," she said, her voice low. She looked me up and down. "You look like hell. Let's go." We didn't talk in the elevator. We didn't talk on the shuttle bus to the parking garage. It wasn't until we were both in the cab of my truck, the doors closed, that she finally spoke. "Show me," she said. I laid it all out on the seat between us. The damp parking ticket. The empty pill bottle. The suicide note. She read the note. "I'm sorry, Dad." She looked at it for a long time. "He never wrote notes to me." There was no sadness in her voice, just a flat statement of fact. It broke my heart more than any tear. "Lila, Don't," she said, cutting me off. "We're not here to grieve. We're here to solve a problem. You said her story has holes." I nodded. "The note was in the car. She said it was at the house. The passport was in the suitcase. She said she was faking a disappearance. It doesn't add up, Lila. She's lying about why she's lying." Lila stared out the windshield at the concrete wall of the garage. "Okay, she's a liar. But she's also greedy. The insurance policy. That's the part that feels real. $5 million. "So what do we do?" I asked. "We use it," she said. "We use her greed against her. She thinks you're on her side. She thinks you're a sentimental old fool who will help her commit fraud to save the family. We're going to let her keep thinking that." We drove back to my house in silence. When we got inside, Lila took charge. She was an ER nurse. She was used to trauma, to making life or death decisions in a split second. "All right," she said, standing in my living room, the one she grew up in. "Here is the plan. You are going to call her. You are going to be the grieving, panicked father-in-law. You are going to agree with her. You're going to say her plan, the insurance plan, is the only way." "What, Lila, I can't?" "Yes, you can, Dad," she said, her voice firm. "You've been playing a part for her for years, the part of the ATM. Now you play a different one. You're her accomplice. You're going to tell her you've been thinking, and you agree. It's what Lucas would have wanted. You'll say anything to make her believe you are in on the fraud." I saw where this was going. "But why?" "Because," Lila said, "accomplices need to get their story straight. You're going to tell her you can't just not report him missing. The police will eventually find the car. You're going to insist that you and she go to the police station together, tomorrow morning, to file a missing person report, together, so your stories match." It was brilliant. "She'll be hesitant," I said, thinking it through. "This complicates her plan." "She won't refuse," Lila said. "Because right now you are her biggest liability. You're the one who found the car. You're the one who found the note. She can't trust what you'll do. But if you offer to go with her to lie for her, You're not a liability anymore. You're her partner in crime. She'll have to agree to keep you close. My hand trembled as I picked up the phone. I looked at my daughter. She had the same determined, logical eyes as Sarah. I dialed. Ben. Megan's voice was wary, nervous. Megan, I said, letting the exhaustion and real grief into my voice. I've been just sitting here, thinking about what you said. The insurance. Ben, I was just... No, I interrupted. You were right. You were right. $5 million. Lucas. He would want us to be secure. He would want that. I'm in. I'll help you. We'll do it your way. I heard her let out a long, slow breath on the other end. A breath of pure relief. Oh, Ben. Thank you. I knew you'd understand. I knew it. But Megan, I said, we have a problem. I'm here, at O'Hare. I found the car. I can't just not report it. The parking garage will report it eventually. The police will find it. We need to get ahead of this. What? What do you mean? She asked, her voice sharp again. I mean, we need to go to them, together. We'll go to the police tomorrow. We'll tell them. We'll tell them the story you told me, that he was depressed, that he talked about leaving, and that I came here looking for him and found the car. We'll just leave out the part about the note and the pills. We'll make it look like a voluntary disappearance. She was silent. I could hear the gears turning in her head. She was trapped. She couldn't say no. If she said no, I might panic and tell the police the truth about the suicide ruining her insurance plan. Together, she asked. Yes, together, I said. That way our stories are exactly the same. They can't poke holes in it. I'll drive to your house first thing in the morning. We'll have coffee. We'll go over the story, every detail. Then we'll go and factual. Okay, she said. Okay, Ben. That's smart. That's a good plan. Come over at 9. We'll figure it out. I hung up. I looked at Lila. She nodded once, a grim smile on her face. She took the bait, Lila said. You're in. You have access to the house tomorrow morning. You'll be alone with her while you plan your story. But Lila, I asked, what's the point? We're just lying to the police. How does that help us find the truth? Lila walked over to her bag and pulled out a small black object. It looked like a USB phone charger. Because, Dad, she said, holding it up, when you go there tomorrow to plan your story, you're going to plant this. And we're finally going to hear who she's really talking to. I picked up my phone. My daughter Lila, my ally, was on her way. But she was 3 hours out. I had to do the next part alone. I called Megan. Ben. Her voice was wary. She was on edge. Megan, I'm driving back from O'Hare now. I'm almost in town. I let my voice sound rough, tired, defeated. Listen, before we call them, before the police, I need a minute. I need to stop by the house alone. What? Why? She snapped. The fake sympathy was gone. I thought we were meeting at 9. We stick to the plan, Ben. I want to get a few things of his, I said, faking a quiver in my voice. A photo from his desk, maybe his old college sweatshirt from the closet. Things, things he loved. Before the police come, before they seal the room or whatever they do. I don't want strangers touching his things. There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear her thinking, calculating. She didn't want me in that house alone. She had probably scrubbed it. But she couldn't refuse. A grieving father asking for a memento. It would look monstrous to say no. Ben, I really don't think that's a good idea, she said, trying to sound gentle. We should just stick to the plan. Please, Megan, I said, applying the pressure. For Sarah's memory. I just need one picture of my son. I won't be long. 15 minutes. Then we can do what we have to do. We can go to the station. Another pause. Then a sigh of exasperation. Fine. Fine, Ben. 15 minutes. But I'll be here. I'm a mess. I shouldn't be alone anyway. I'm on my way, I said, and hung up. I had the USB camera in my pocket. Lila had bought it at an airport electronics store. It was a high-definition audio-enabled recorder, and it looked exactly like a black phone charger block. I pulled up to the house. It was just 8 in the morning. The sun was bright, shining on their perfect manicured lawn. It all looked so normal. I knocked. Megan opened the door. She was dressed. Her makeup was on. But she had managed to make herself look fragile. Her eyes were red. She'd probably been cutting onions or just rubbing them. She was a hell of an actress. Ben, she whispered, pulling me into a hug I didn't return. I'm so glad you're here. I'm so scared. I know, honey, I said, patting her back. I am too. She stepped back and her eyes immediately scanned me from my muddy boots, which I wore on purpose, to my exhausted face, which was genuine. She was checking me, assessing my state. You look terrible, she said. I haven't slept. I answered, which was true. I need that picture. Of course, she said. His study is this way. She was hovering. She wasn't going to let me out of her sight. I knew she wouldn't. This was going to be harder than I thought. I needed a distraction. I followed her to Lucas's home office. The room was sterile, not just clean but sterile, like a hotel room that had been wiped down. Not a stray piece of paper, not a coffee mug. She had been busy. My eyes scanned the desk. She had missed something. On the spike file skewered with other receipts was the invoice. The $50,000 wire transfer I had made. The payment for his gambling debt. My name, Ben Carter, was printed right on it. My ungrateful son. I felt a genuine hot wave of anger and sorrow. I used it. I walked over to the desk, my back to her. I picked up the invoice. $50,000. I whispered, my voice thick. I gave him everything. And it wasn't enough. I let my shoulders shake. I leaned heavily on the desk, faking a sob. My boy, what happened to you? It was the perfect distraction. Megan hated this. She hated real, messy emotion. Ben, she said, her voice sharp and uncomfortable. Ben, please don't. That's not helping. We need to be strong. We need to focus. I'll go make us some coffee. We have to be ready for the police. I heard her footsteps hesitate, then retreat. I'll be right back. Just take your minute. The second I heard the sound of the Keurig machine whirring to life in the kitchen, I moved. I didn't go for a photo. I walked straight out of the study, through the hall, and into the main living room. I knew the layout. I knew where she sat. The white sectional sofa. I knew where she charged her phone. There was an outlet right behind the end table next to the sofa arm. I had maybe 30 seconds. I walked over. A floor lamp was plugged into the top socket. The bottom socket was empty. I pulled the small black USB camera from my pocket. My hands, the hands of an engineer, were perfectly steady. I slid the device into the outlet. A tiny blue light flickered once, then went dark. It was active. It was on. The tiny pinprick-sized lens had a perfect wide-angle view of the entire sofa, the coffee table, and the doorway to the kitchen. I walked back into the study. I grabbed the first framed photo I saw. It was Lucas and me at his college graduation. His smile was wide. Mine was too. The father and the proud, successful son. What a joke. I was holding the photo when Megan walked back in carrying 2 mugs. Here, she said, her voice softer now that I had composed myself. Drink this. You look pale. Thank you, Megan, I said, taking the mug. My hand was steady. I just grabbed this. I held up the picture. I'm ready. Let's go over the story. What exactly are we going to tell them? I sat down on the sofa right across from my hidden camera. I took a sip of the coffee. It was bitter and it tasted like a lie. Now we just had to perform. Would the police believe the grieving father and the hysterical wife? Or would they see the cracks in our story, just as I'd seen the cracks in hers? We sat at the polished kitchen island, the 2 coffee mugs between us. The house was immaculate, silent. Megan had been rehearsing. So I'll tell them he was distant all week, she whispered, her eyes wide. And you just say you got a bad feeling this morning. That's why you went to O'Hare. Don't mention the lake. Don't mention the black suitcase. Don't mention anything. Just the car and the note. No, wait. No, not the note. No note, I agreed, my voice a low rumble. We agreed. No note. That's our leverage for the insurance. We just say he vanished. He was depressed about money. He took off. Right. She was wringing her hands. Just a worried father and a terrified wife. I looked at her. She was a phenomenal actress. She had managed to work herself into a state of believable agitation. Her hands were shaking. Her eyes were red. A casual observer would see a wife on the verge of a breakdown. I saw a murderer, or at least a co-conspirator, worried her performance wasn't good enough. A car door slammed outside. Megan jumped, letting out a little yelp. They're here. I walked to the window. A marked police cruiser was parked in her driveway right behind my truck. 2 officers were getting out. One was older with a tired face. The other was young, alert, his hand resting near his belt. Okay, I said, turning to her. Let me do most of the talking. I'm the grieving father. You're just in shock. Can you do that? Just cry, you're good at that. She shot me a look of pure venom, a quick flash of the real Megan before her face crumpled back into the mask of sorrow. I opened the front door before they could knock. Officers, thank God you're here. Mr. Carter, Ben Carter, the older one, Officer Davies, asked. Yes. This is my daughter-in-law, Megan. It's my son. Lucas. He's missing. We sat in the living room, the same room where I had planted the camera. It was humming silently in the wall socket, recording everything. The officers sat on the sofa. Megan and I took the armchairs, a tactical decision on my part. I wanted to watch her. So, Officer Davies said, opening his notepad, tell us what happened. From the beginning. Megan started to cry right on cue. A soft, broken whimper. I can't. Ben, please, you tell them. I leaned forward, clasping my hands together, the picture of a strong father, trying to hold it together. It's my son, Lucas. He's been having a hard time. Business. Money problems. You know. He's been depressed. Megan cut in, her voice trembling. He wasn't sleeping. He kept talking about just leaving, getting away from it all. When was the last time you saw him? The young officer Riley asked. Last night, Megan lied, her voice catching. He stormed out after a fight. He said he just needed space. He packed a bag, a small blue one. I kept my face a mask of stone. She was sticking to her first lie. The blue suitcase. She was good. She was consistent. And you, sir? Davies asked, turning to me. I had a bad feeling, I said, letting my voice crack. I've been worried about him. That $50,000 debt I paid, it was serious. I didn't sleep well. This morning I just felt something was wrong. I thought maybe he'd do something foolish. He always talked about flying away. So I drove to O'Hare. Just a hunch. And what did you find? His car, I said. His BMW. It was in the long-term parking. Garage C, I have a spare key. I opened it. And he was gone. The car was empty. It was just empty. I put my head in my hands. I didn't have to fake this part. The image of the empty pill bottle, the note to me. The grief was real, even if the story I was telling was a lie. Megan wailed a high-pitched, awful sound. Oh my God! He's really gone! What if he hurt himself? The officers exchanged a look. This was familiar territory for them. Officer Davies sighed. Ma'am, Mr. Carter, right now there's no evidence of foul play, or even of anything else. We have a grown man who had a fight with his wife, packed a bag, and drove his car to the airport. To us, this sounds like a voluntary missing person. He's an adult. He's allowed to leave. But what about his depression? I pushed. His debts? We'll file the report, of course, Riley said, his voice clipped and professional. We'll put his name out. We'll check flight manifests, though, without a passport number that's hard. But frankly, 9 times out of 10 they show up in a week, usually in Vegas or Florida after they've run out of money. Megan looked up, her eyes wide with fake innocence. But what do we do? For now you wait, Davies said, closing his notepad. We'll check the car for prints, tow it in. But unless he used a credit card or his passport, he's just gone. We'll be in touch. They stood up. They gave us their cards. They were polite, they were professional, and they didn't suspect a thing. They had bought her performance and mine completely. I walked them to the door. I watched the cruiser pull away. I closed the door and turned around. Megan was still sitting in the armchair, but the tears were gone. She was staring at the wall, her expression completely blank. Well, she said, her voice flat. That went okay. Yes, I said. They believed us. I looked at her. Her performance was masterful. If I hadn't seen that black suitcase with my own eyes, if I hadn't found that parking ticket, if I hadn't seen the note in the car, I would have believed her. I would have believed my son was just another sad statistic, a man who buckled under pressure and ran away. I felt a chill run down my spine. She was better at this than I was. I need to get home, I said, my voice heavy. I need to process this, and I need to call Lila. Right, she said, standing up suddenly, all business. Right, Lila. We need to tell Lila. I'll handle it, I said. You just rest. I walked out of the house. I got in my truck. I drove down the street, my hands steady. The police were gone. She thought she was safe. She thought she had a partner in crime. She thought the sentimental old fool had bought her story and was now complicit in her fraud. Now I thought driving around the corner and parking in the shadows. Now, let's see what she does when she thinks no one is watching. I put the truck in drive and pulled away from the curb. I didn't go home. I didn't go far. I drove 2 blocks down, turned the corner, and parked the truck under the heavy shade of an old oak tree where I had a clear view of the street, but was hidden in the morning shadows. I put the truck in park. A moment later, the passenger door of my pickup opened, and my daughter Lila slid in. She'd been waiting in her rental car on the next street over, just like we planned. She didn't say a word. She didn't ask, "How did it go?" She just looked at me, her eyes clear and focused. She was a nurse used to crises, and she was in full ER mode. They bought it, I said. My voice was low, rough. The whole story. Grieving wife, worried father. They think he's just another guy who ran off. Lila nodded grimly. She pulled out her own phone ready to record. Did you plant it? I took my phone from my shirt pocket. My hand was steady. I opened the app, the one she'd installed for me. I tapped the icon, living room cam. The screen flickered for a second, connecting, and then the image resolved. There it was, her living room. The giant, sterile white sofa. The glass coffee table. The camera was in the perfect spot. That USB charger in the wall had a perfect wide-angle view of the entire room. And there she was. Megan. The moment that police cruiser had pulled away from her curb, the mask had dropped. Lila and I watched silent, horrified. The woman who had been sobbing into her hands, so overcome with grief, she could barely speak. She was gone. In her place was a woman I'd never seen before, but one I was starting to recognize. She was standing in the middle of her living room, her back to the camera, just staring at the front door where the officers had left. She's not even crying, Lila whispered, her eyes glued to my phone screen. She's thinking, I said. She's calculating. We watched as Megan stood perfectly still for almost a full minute. Then she moved. Her movements weren't slow or sad. They were sharp, efficient, angry. She marched over to the wet bar in the corner of the room. She grabbed a wine glass, a huge one big enough to hold a fish. She yanked open the small wine fridge, pulled out a bottle of white wine, and poured a glass that was nearly full to the brim. This was not a grieving wife. This was not even the greedy wife I thought I understood. This was a woman who had just finished a high-stakes performance and was furious it had been so difficult. She's celebrating, I murmured. No, Lila said, her voice tight. She's not celebrating. Look at her face. Megan turned and the camera caught her expression. She wasn't happy. She was seething. She took a long, deep drink of the wine, draining half the glass in one go. Then she began to pace, back and forth, from the sofa to the floor-to-ceiling windows, back and forth. She was a caged panther. I've never liked her, Lila said quietly, her eyes never leaving the screen. You always thought I was just jealous. Jealous because you paid so much attention to Lucas, to his potential. But I'm a nurse, Dad. I work in the ER. I see liars every single day. People who accidentally hurt their children. Spouses who found their partner at the bottom of the stairs. They all have the same look in their eyes. What look? I asked. Empty, Lila said. Just like that. She's not grieving. She's not even relieved. She's annoyed. This whole thing, your son vanishing, it's just an inconvenience to her. I thought back to her performance for the police, the flawless tears, the trembling voice. If I hadn't seen that black suitcase with my own eyes, if I hadn't found that parking ticket, I would have believed her. I would have spent the rest of my life believing my son was just a coward who ran away. The thought made me sick. On the screen, Megan stopped pacing. She finished the rest of her wine in one swallow and slammed the glass down on the coffee table. She looked at her watch, and then she pulled out her cell phone. She didn't call 911. She didn't call her mother to cry. She didn't call a friend for support. She tapped a contact on her screen and put the phone to her ear. She's calling someone, I whispered. Is the audio on? Lila asked, already holding up her own phone, hitting the record video button to capture the feed from my screen. It's active, I said. We leaned in our heads, almost touching, straining to hear the tiny speaker on my phone. The camera was picking up her side of the conversation. Her voice was no longer the soft, trembling whisper of a victim. It was low, sharp, and furious. It's a mess, she snapped into the phone. The old man is back. He found the car. Lila and I stared at each other. My blood ran cold. Who in God's name was she talking to? Lila's hand was shaking as she held her phone, but she kept the camera steady, recording the feed from my screen. The audio from the USB charger was tinny, distorted, but clear enough. Megan was pacing her living room, her face a mask of cold fury. She wasn't the grieving widow. She wasn't the panicked wife. She was a general whose battle plan had just been disrupted. "I don't care what you think," she hissed into her phone. "You do nothing. You stay exactly where you are. Do you understand me?" She stopped pacing and ran her free hand through her hair, a gesture of pure frustration. "Because he is here, the old man. He's back. He found the car at O'Hare." Lila and I stared at each other in the dim cab of my truck. My heart was a cold, heavy stone in my chest. Who was she talking to? A partner, someone she hired. "No," Megan snapped, cutting off the person on the other end. He thinks you killed yourself. He found the note I left in the car. He found the pill bottle." She listened again, her body rigid. "I don't care if you're nervous," she yelled, her voice a low, dangerous growl. "You are not coming back. He's a sentimental old fool. I handled him. You stay exactly where you are. He thinks you killed yourself. Who was she talking to that was supposed to be dead?" And then for the first time, the microphone on the charger picked up the faint, distorted sound from the earpiece of her phone. It was weak, and it was tinny, but it was there. "Are you sure?" the voice said. "Are you sure he bought it? He doesn't suspect anything." I stopped breathing. My blood turned to ice. My heart, which had been pounding just a second ago, stopped completely. Lila's head snapped towards my phone. Her hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with a disbelieving horror that mirrored my own. I knew that voice. I had heard that voice every single day for 45 years. I had heard it whisper, "Good night, Dad," when he was a boy. I had heard it laugh at my jokes. I had heard it just 6 months ago, pleading with me for $50,000. It was Lucas. It was my son who I thought was dead. My son who I had just spent the morning grieving for in a cold concrete parking garage. My son who I believed I had failed, who I believed had taken his own life because I was too hard on him. He was alive. It wasn't relief. It was something else. A profound systemic shock. A cold, horrifying realization that washed over me, chilling me more than the lake water ever did. He was alive. The black suitcase in the lake. It was a prop. The empty pill bottle. A prop. The suicide note. "I'm sorry, Dad." All of it. It was a lie. A sick, elaborate, theatrical lie. "He's alive," I whispered, the words catching in my dry throat. I grabbed Lila's arm, my fingers digging into her scrubs. "Lila, he's alive." "Shh." She hissed, her eyes darting between me and the phone, her hand still recording. "Dad, listen. She's still talking." I forced myself to focus, to listen past the ringing in my ears. Megan was speaking again, her voice calming down, shifting from raw anger to cold strategy. "No," she said, "he doesn't suspect a thing. I told him the insurance story. I told him we'd lose the $5 million if the cops ruled it a suicide. He ate it up. He actually offered to help me lie to the police. He thinks he's my partner now." She laughed. A short, ugly, barking laugh that held no humor. "The sentimental old fool. He'll do anything I say." I felt the blood drain from my face. I felt physically sick. They weren't just lying to me. They were using me. They were turning me, a 70-year-old man, into an accomplice in their own sick game. My son, Lucas. He was alive, and he was letting this happen. He was on the other end of that phone listening, as his wife called his father a sentimental old fool. He was letting her, making her, lie to me, manipulate me. He was letting me believe he was dead. The betrayal was so total, so complete, I couldn't even process it. It was a structural impossibility, a bridge collapsing in on itself. It was all there. The pieces were finally locking into place. The insurance. The $5 million. This wasn't a murder. This wasn't a cover-up of a suicide. This was a plan. A cold-blooded plan executed by two people to fake a death defraud an insurance company and use the grieving father as their unwitting pawn. But why? Why this elaborate, cruel charade? Why involve me at all? Why not just disappear? I couldn't move. Lila's fingernails were digging into my arm, but I didn't feel it. I was frozen. The blood in my veins had turned to slush. He was alive. The grief, the guilt, the agonizing self-blame I had felt in that parking garage. It was all a sham. A performance he had orchestrated. He wasn't dead. He was in Mexico City waiting for a payout. On my phone screen, Megan laughed. A short, ugly sound. No, he's too stupid and sentimental. He's an old fool, Lucas. He'll do whatever I say. Now you just stick to the plan. You stay put. Stay in Mexico City. Don't use your real name. Don't use any cards. Wait for me to call. Mexico City. While I was dragging his suitcase out of a freezing lake, he was on vacation. The police were just here. Megan continued, her voice all business now. I played the part. They bought the whole voluntary missing person story. They think you just ran off. They're not even suspicious. She took a sip of her wine. After a few months, when nobody can find you, I'll file the claim. And once I get the $5 million, our $5 million, I'll liquidate the house, I'll clean out the accounts, and I will fly straight to you. We start over. New life. No debts. No family. A long pause. And then I heard his voice again. My son's voice. Tinny faint, but full of worry. But what about my dad? What about the old man? He's not just going to let this go. You said he found the car. He'll keep digging. Lila and I looked at each other. On the screen, Megan walked toward the window, her back to the camera, looking out at the quiet suburban street. She was smiling. I could see the smile in the reflection on the glass. "Oh, Lucas," she said, her voice dripping with a contempt that chilled me to the bone. "That's the best part." I felt my stomach clench. The best part. I left just enough clues behind for them, she said. The pills, the note. The note was perfect. I'm sorry, Dad. It was your idea, Lucas, and I have to admit it was brilliant. If the police do keep digging, if they don't buy the ran away story, what do you think they'll find? I knew. In that instant, I knew. My mind, the engineer's mind, assembled the pieces. The note addressed to me. The empty pill bottle. The car I had found. No, I whispered. Lila just stared at the screen, her face white. They'll find the note addressed to him, Megan said, her voice giddy with her own cleverness. They'll find the empty pill bottle. They'll think he helped you, assisted suicide, or even better, they'll think he killed you. The room started to spin. Oh yes, she continued, pacing, now energized. They'll think the grieving father had a fight with his deadbeat son over money. I already told Mrs. Henderson next door that you two had a massive argument last week. About the $50,000. I told her I heard him yelling, threatening you. It's perfect. Either way, Ben Carter becomes their #1 suspect. He'll be so busy trying to prove his innocence, defending himself against a murder investigation, that he won't have time to look for us. By the time he's cleared, if he ever is, we'll be long gone. We get the money, and he takes the fall. This was the truth. The final horrifying structural truth. It wasn't murder. It wasn't a suicide cover-up. It was a $5 million insurance fraud. And I, Benjamin Carter, their father, I was the scapegoat. I was the one they were building the bridge to collapse on. My son. My Lucas. He knew this. He was part of this. He had agreed to let me go to prison for him. He had written the note, "I'm sorry, Dad," not as a final goodbye, but as the bait in a trap. The betrayal was so total, so monstrous, I couldn't breathe. Lila was staring at me, her face pale, her eyes blazing with a fury I had never seen. On the screen, Megan took a final sip of her wine. She put the glass down. She looked at her phone. She was dialing again. What now? What else could there possibly be? She ended the call with Lucas. My son. The son who was at that very moment sunning himself in Mexico City while planning his father's funeral, or worse, his arrest. Lila and I just sat in the truck, stunned. The silence in the cab was thick, heavy. I watched my daughter-in-law on the screen. She didn't look relieved. She didn't look happy. She looked like a predator that had just wounded its prey and was waiting for it to bleed out. She stood there, staring at her phone, her thumb hovering. Who is she calling now? Lila whispered, her voice barely audible. She's already talked to her partner in crime. Who else is there? I don't know. I breathed. My mind was blank. The betrayal was so complete I couldn't think. I couldn't see the next step. On the screen, Megan took a deep, steadying breath. It was a performer's breath, the kind you take before you walk on stage. She pressed a number on her phone. She was calling someone new. She put the phone to her ear. She waited. Her face, which had been hard and cold, suddenly crumpled. The mask of the grieving widow was back, but this time it was even more convincing. The tears looked real. Her lower lip trembled. Hello, she said into the phone, her voice cracking with a perfect imitation sob. Hello. Yes, this is Megan Carter. I was just in, with my father-in-law, about my missing husband. I looked at Lila. Her eyes were wide. She's calling the police, Lila whispered. She's calling Officer Davies back. Why? I said. We just left. The plan is set. Shh. Listen. Yes, officer, I know. Megan continued, pacing the room, the camera capturing her Oscar-worthy performance. I know, I said. I thought he just ran away. But I'm scared. I'm so scared. I think I lied to you. I was protecting someone. Lila and I stared at the screen, horrified. What was she doing? It's my father-in-law, she sobbed. Ben Carter. He wasn't telling you the whole truth. When he came over this morning, he was acting so strangely. He was wearing muddy clothes. And he kept talking about how much money Lucas owed him. He was angry, officer. Lila gasped. That monster. He said Lucas was a bad investment, Megan cried, her voice rising in hysteria. And then he pressured me. He told me what story to tell you. He told me to lie. He said we had to say Lucas just ran away. I was so scared. I just agreed. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. She wasn't just planting clues for them to find later. She was actively right now painting me as the killer. She was turning my help into coercion. I don't know what to do, she wailed. But you asked me if there was any foul play. And now I think there is. I think, oh God, I think Ben knows where my husband is. I think he might have hurt him. He was so angry about the money. Please, you have to look into him. Please. She listened for a moment, nodding, wiping away fake tears. Yes. Yes, I'll be here. Thank you. Thank you so much. She hung up the phone. She stood completely still. The tears stopped, instantly. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, her expression now cold, hard, and satisfied. She walked to the wet bar, picked up her wine glass, and poured herself another. She raised the glass to her reflection in the dark window. Checkmate, you old fool, she whispered so low, it was almost inaudible. But the camera picked it up. I hit the stop recording button on my phone. The screen went black. Lila and I sat in the truck in total silence. There was nothing to say. I had seen it all. I was not a grieving father. I was not a sentimental old fool. I was a loose end. And she had just tried to tie me up. She had just sicked the police on me using my own grief, my own muddy jeans from the lake as evidence against me. Dad, Lila said, her voice shaking with a rage I had never heard in her. What are we going to do? I put the phone in my pocket. I took a deep breath. The engineer is back in control. The shock was gone. What are we going to do? I said, turning the key in the ignition. The old truck roared to life. First, we send this entire video file to a secure server. Second, you call your lawyer. Not my lawyer, your lawyer. Why? Because, I said, pulling the truck into gear, I am no longer just a witness. That woman just accused me of murder. I am now a suspect. And we are going to need a hell of a lot more than just my word against hers. I wasn't just fighting for my son's memory anymore. I was fighting for my life. I put the truck in gear and pulled away from the curb. My hands weren't shaking anymore. They were steady. The engineer was back. The sentimental old fool Megan thought she was playing. He was gone. He died in that living room listening to her call him stupid. Lila was silent beside me, her face pale, her jaw set. She was still recording the file on her phone just to be safe. Dad, she said, her voice tight. She just accused you of murder. To the police, they're going to come for you. I know, I said calmly, my eyes on the road. I wasn't driving home. I was driving to my workshop. She just made the biggest mistake of her life. She escalated. She thought she was checkmating me, but she just showed her entire hand. What do we do? Lila asked. We can't go to the local police. She's already poisoned them. They're looking at you. Exactly, I said. You don't fight a house fire with a garden hose. You call the fire department. And you don't fight federal wire fraud, insurance fraud, and a conspiracy to frame someone for murder by calling the local cops. You call in the big guns. And we pulled into my workshop, my real home, the place where I understood the world. I hit the garage door opener and we drove into the familiar smell of sawdust and steel. I shut the door, sealing us in. Dad, what are you? Lila, I said, turning to her. You were right. I was a fool. I was so focused on fixing Lucas, I ignored the daughter who was already perfectly built. You have your mother's strength. And right now I need that strength. I was right. They're monsters. Lila finally let out a shaky breath. So what's the plan, Dad? I didn't call the local police. They were already compromised. Megan had painted me as the prime suspect. I pulled out my phone. I scrolled past Lila, past Lucas, to lawyer Harrison. Mrs. Harrison wasn't just any lawyer. She was the toughest corporate litigator in Chicago. She had handled my engineering contracts for 30 years. She was 72, she was brilliant, and she did not suffer fools. She picked up on the first ring. Ben, this is a surprise. I thought you were grieving. Harrison, I said, my voice all business. I am not grieving. I am being framed. I need you. Right now. I have video and audio evidence of my daughter-in-law Megan and my son Lucas, who is not dead, planning a $5 million insurance fraud. And that's not the worst part. Go on, she said. Her voice was suddenly ice. The worst part is that they've been planting evidence, the suicide note, the pills, to frame me for Lucas's murder or assisted suicide. And Megan just called the local police accusing me of exactly that. She's trying to get me arrested to silence me while they escape to Mexico City. I heard her typing. Fast. Ben, she said, her voice sharp. Where are you? In my workshop. My daughter Lila is with me. She's my witness. The video file is uploading to the cloud as we speak. It's almost 10 minutes long. It has everything. Lucas's voice, Mexico City. The 5 million. The plan to frame me. Good, Harrison said. Do not leave that workshop. Do not talk to the local police. Do not answer your door. Megan just committed a federal crime. Multiple federal crimes. This isn't a local matter anymore. What are you going to do? I'm going to do what you pay me for, she said. I am hanging up. I am reviewing the file you are sending me. And then I am making one phone call to a friend of mine at the FBI's white-collar crime division. This is wire fraud, mail fraud conspiracy. This is interstate. This is their jurisdiction. Megan wanted to call the cops. Fine. We'll call better cops. Harrison, they think I'm just a sentimental old fool. I said the words tasting like acid. I know, she replied, and I could almost hear the grim smile in her voice. That's her second biggest mistake. Her first was trying to outsmart me. Send me that file, Ben. And sit tight. The game has just changed. She hung up. Lila and I sat in the silence of the workshop, the massive silent tools of my old life surrounding us. The file finished uploading. Sent. So now what? Lila asked. Now I said, walking over to my old coffee pot and starting a fresh brew. We wait. We wait for the trap we set to catch the rat. And then we wait for the exterminators. The game was no longer mine to play. It was in the hands of the FBI. When would the trap finally spring? The call came the next morning. It wasn't Harrison. It was Officer Davies, the local cop from yesterday. His voice was no longer patient. It was firm. Mr. Carter, we need you to come down to your daughter-in-law's residence. We have some follow-up questions regarding your statement. Some new information has come to light. New information? I asked, playing dumb. Yes, sir. Your daughter-in-law provided a supplemental statement. We need to clarify your timeline. Can you meet us there in 20 minutes? Of course, officer. I'll be right over. I hung up. I looked at Lila. She had slept on the old cot in my workshop. She looked tired, but her eyes were sharp. They're here, I said. Megan's police. They want me at the house. It's the trap, Lila said, standing up. She's trying to get you on her turf with her cops to accuse you publicly. I know, I said. I put on the same jacket I'd worn yesterday. Harrison said to wait for her signal. She said the feds move at their own pace. She told me to stall if they called. So what are you going to do? I'm going to walk right into her trap, I said. I picked up my keys. But she's not the only one who set one. When I pulled my truck onto her street, I saw them. 2 local police cruisers parked at the curb. Officer Davies and his young partner Riley were standing on the walkway. And Megan. She was standing by the front door, wrapped in a blanket, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. She looked like the perfect victim. She saw my truck, and her face hardened for just a second before it crumpled back into that mask of sorrow. She was ready for her final performance. I got out of the truck. Officers, I said, walking toward them. What's this all about? Has there been news? That's what we're here to find out, Mr. Carter, Officer Davies said, his hand resting on his notepad. He was not my friend this morning. Your daughter-in-law, Mrs. Carter, has told us some things that contradict your story from yesterday. Megan let out a sob. I just want to find my husband. Mrs. Carter here says, Davies continued, his eyes locked on me, that you and your son had a significant financial dispute, that you were angry with him, that you threatened him just last week. I looked at Megan. She was peeking at me through her fingers, watching my reaction. I paid a debt for him, yes, I said calmly. I was upset. Any father would be. She also says, Officer Riley chimed in, stepping forward, that you pressured her into telling the runaway story, that you were the one who insisted on it, that you were wearing muddy clothes when you arrived yesterday morning. Is that true, sir? The trap was sprung. Here it was. The grieving father, the angry threats, the muddy clothes from the lake. She had handed them a perfect case against me. He threatened him, Megan wailed, pointing a trembling finger at me. I heard him. He was yelling about all the money. He was jealous of Lucas. He thought Lucas was wasting the family's future. This was it. The moment she thought she had won. That's a hell of a performance, Megan, I said, my voice quiet, but it cut through her fake sobs. She stopped crying, her eyes narrowing. What? What did you say? I repeated, it's an excellent performance, but you missed a few details. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you. Officer Davies began stepping toward me. And at that exact moment, a black sedan, a Ford Taurus with no markings, turned the corner and pulled up silently behind the police cruisers. It was followed by a second. The doors opened. My lawyer Harrison stepped out, looking like she was walking into a boardroom, not a suburban street. She was followed by Lila, and behind them 2 men and a woman in dark suits with telltale badges clipped to their belts. They didn't run, they walked. Every step was full of authority. Officer Davies, Harrison said, her voice like steel. My name is Barbara Harrison. I represent this man, Benjamin Carter. The local cops looked stunned, confused by the sudden shift in power. Megan's face, her perfect, grieving, tear-streaked face. It froze. The color drained away. She stared at the FBI agents, her mouth half open. What is this? She whispered. Thuakek Sai Kwan, Harrison said, turning to Davies and Riley. My client, Mr. Carter, is not a suspect. He is the victim of a multi-state conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, wire fraud, and a malicious attempt to frame him for murder. One of the FBI agents, a tall woman with cold, intelligent eyes, stepped forward, holding up her badge. Officer Davies, we'll be taking over from here. This is now a federal investigation. She turned her gaze from the local cops to the woman on the porch. Mrs. Carter, the agent said, her voice flat. I'm Agent Thorne. I have a few questions for you, but first, you have the right to remain silent. The world stopped. The birds stopped singing. I looked at Megan. The mask was gone. There was no grief, no anger, just the raw, primal terror of an animal caught in a steel trap. She looked at me. Our eyes met. She didn't see a sentimental old fool. She saw the engineer who had just brought her entire unstable, fraudulent bridge crashing down around her. She crumpled. Not a fake sob. A real guttural collapse, her legs giving out, as she fell onto the pristine walkway. It was over. Megan didn't scream. She didn't protest. When Agent Thorne said, "You have the right to remain silent," something in her just broke. The intricate structure of her lies, the web she had so carefully built, had just been hit by a wrecking ball. She just sat on the walkway, a hollowed-out version of the confident woman from last night, and stared at the grass. Officer Davies, the local cop, looked completely lost. He was still holding his notepad, his mouth slightly open. "Agent Thorne," he stammered, I don't understand. We had a credible report of a potential homicide." Harrison, my lawyer, stepped forward. She was in her element. This was her bridge, her courtroom. "You had a report, officer, because Mrs. Carter fed it to you," she said, her voice cutting through the morning air. She was fabricating a case against her father-in-law to cover her own crimes. She was desperate. She was trying to frame him. She held up her phone. "We have the recording, officers. The one my client made. The one where she and her husband, Lucas Carter, who is very much alive, discuss their $5 million insurance fraud and their plan to make Ben Carter here the fall guy." She didn't play it for them. She didn't need to. The presence of the FBI told the whole story. Agent Thorne nodded to her team. One of the male agents stepped forward, pulled Megan up from the ground by her arm, and placed her in handcuffs. The metallic click was the loudest sound on the street. "Megan Carter," Agent Thorne said, "you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, insurance fraud, and filing a false police report." They put her in the back of the unmarked sedan. She didn't even look at me. As for the husband, the agent continued, turning to her team. "The one in Mexico City. Get the liaison for the Mexican Federales on the phone. We know the city. We have a voice print. Let's go get him." It all unraveled so fast. Before noon it was over. But the consequences, they were just beginning. By that evening, my face was on every local news station. The story was too juicy to ignore. 70-year-old engineer busts $5 million fraud plot. They painted me as some kind of hero, a grieving father who uncovered a dark conspiracy. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt empty. I felt tired. The media was camped out on my street. I had to go stay with Lila. The legal and financial fallout was catastrophic for them. Harrison was ruthless. The first thing she did was contact the bank that held the mortgage on their massive house, the loan I had co-signed. "Ben," she told me over the phone 2 days later, "it's done. I sent the bank's legal department the audio file and a sworn affidavit. I informed them your co-signature was obtained under fraudulent pretenses, as the primary borrowers were actively conspiring to frame you for a federal crime." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means you are no longer liable for that mortgage," she said. "And since they haven't made a payment in 2 months, they were already in default. The bank is foreclosing, immediately." They lost the house. The news from Mexico came 48 hours later. The Federales had found him. Lucas. He wasn't in a 5-star resort. He was in a cheap motel outside Mexico City, waiting just like Megan told him to. The picture of him in handcuffs being led onto a plane at O'Hare. He wasn't the confident investor. He wasn't my brilliant, charming son. He was just small. He looked thin and terrified. The trial was a blur. I had to testify. I had to sit on that stand in front of a jury of strangers and tell the world what my son and his wife had planned to do to me. I had to watch the jury listen to that horrible recording. I had to watch them play the video of Megan in her living room, her voice cold and hard, saying, "He takes the fall." Lucas and Megan, faced with the evidence, turned on each other. It was pathetic. He blamed her greed for the insurance money. She blamed his weakness for the gambling debts that started the whole mess. They didn't stand a chance. The jury found them guilty on all counts. They were facing years, many years, federal charges, conspiracy, fraud. They lost everything: their house, their cars, their freedom. I had won. I had protected myself. I had exposed the truth. But as I walked out of that courtroom, past the cameras and the reporters, I didn't feel victorious. I felt like I had just buried my son after all. I went back to my house, the brick house Sarah and I had built. It was quiet. Too quiet. For a week, I just sat in my workshop, staring at the blueprints on the wall. Blueprints for bridges that were still standing strong and true. That house. It was supposed to be Lucas's. Everything I had built, every late night I'd worked, every dollar I'd saved, it was all for him. It was meant to be his legacy. But what do you do when the person you built everything for tries to tear you down? You can't live in a structure that's been compromised. You have to condemn it. I called a realtor the next day. A young, energetic woman who didn't understand why I was selling the most beloved house on the block. "It's a gem, Mr. Carter," she said. "We'll have offers in a day." She was right. It sold in 12 hours. I sold everything: the house, the tools I'd used for 50 years, the furniture Sarah and I had picked out. I kept my clothes, my truck, and one framed photo of Sarah. That was it. Lila had been calling me every day. "Dad, what are you doing? Where will you go?" "I don't know." I'd tell her, I can't be here anymore. This place is full of ghosts." "Then come here," she said, her voice firm, the same one she used in the truck at O'Hare. Don't be alone. Stop being alone. Come to Boulder. Come be a grandfather. My son Leo, he's 10. He's been asking why he never sees you. What am I supposed to tell him? The words hit me. Leo, my grandson. I hadn't seen him in over a year. I'd missed his birthday. I was too busy worrying about Lucas. So I went. I packed my truck with the one photo and my clothes, and I drove west. I drove for 2 days away from Illinois, away from the lake, away from the courthouse, away from the wreckage of the life I had built. Now 6 months later, I'm sitting in a small workshop I built in Lila's backyard. It's not as big as my old one, but the view is better. The mountains rise up sharp and clear against the blue Colorado sky. They are stable. They are honest. The smell of sawdust is the same. It smells like truth. Grandpa, I look down. My grandson Leo is staring at a small wooden truss. He's 10. He has Lila's eyes. My eyes. This piece doesn't fit, he says, frustrated. I take the small piece of balsa wood from his hand. That's because you're trying to force it, I say, my voice gentle. Look, you're fighting the load. You have to see the design. The bridge doesn't stay up because you force the pieces. It stays up because the pieces support each other. See, the load is distributed. That's what makes it strong. He watches as I slide the piece into place. It fits perfectly. Wow, he says. You're like a real engineer. I smile. A real, genuine smile. I spent my whole life building things for a son who only saw me as an ATM. A son who was willing to send me to prison to fund his escape. I ignored the daughter who loved me. I ignored the grandson who just wanted me to teach him how to build something. Lucas and Megan, they tried to frame me. They called me a sentimental old fool. They thought I was a crumbling structure they could just push over. But they were wrong. An engineer never forgets how to read a blueprint. And I had read their criminal design from start to finish. I look at Leo, who is now carefully placing the next piece of the bridge. I'm not building a legacy for a traitor anymore. I'm not pouring my foundation on unstable ground. I'm finally building a family, with the people who were worth it all along. Not everyone we love deserves to be kept close. Spend your time and heart on those who truly appreciate you. They are the real family and the true foundation for happiness. If you relate to this story, like and follow the channel so you won't miss more touching stories and valuable life lessons. Share this story with the people you care about so they can also recognize the true value of family.